I still remember the exact moment I found out. It's burned into my head like a bad tattoo I can't scrub off. We had been together for years, me, him, a quiet life, plans about the future. I thought everything was solid, unbreakable, until that night. It was supposed to be a girls' night. I'd left early, promising to be back late. He was working late himself, so I didn't think twice. I grabbed a bottle of wine, threw on something comfortable, and headed out, feeling a rare sense of freedom. The city was alive, lights flickering off puddles, the buzz of laughter and music in my ears. I never imagined I'd come home to silence that would eventually shatter my world. I got a call from a friend around midnight, saying she saw my husband's car outside the downtown. My stomach sank. My mind spun. I told her I'd be right there, but I didn't need her to tell me what I already suspected. My gut had been warning me for weeks, maybe months, little things that didn't add up. The way he'd gotten unreasonably defensive about his phone or his disappearing acts after work. That strange, nervous energy he'd carry around lately. I parked the car and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before walking through the lobby. Every step I took felt heavier than the last. When I reached the hotel room door, I hesitated. My hand trembling, I reached out and pushed it open. The sight inside made my blood run cold. There they were, him and the best man from our wedding, tangled in sheets, utterly caught. The room smelled like cheap perfume and sweat, the faint glow of the bedside lamp casting shadows over their guilty faces. My knees nearly buckled. I saw her clutching the sheets to her chest, eyes wide with shock and shame. His face was red, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I couldn't speak at first. My throat felt constricted, my fists clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. My mind flashed with every moment I ever trusted him, every laugh, every promise. All of it turned to dust in that instant. I just stood there, frozen, trembling with the weight of betrayal. What the hell is this? I finally managed to whisper, voice cracking. They both looked at me as if I'd just dropped from the sky. His jaw tightened and her eyes filled with tears. She looked shocked, but I knew better. I'd seen her flirt before, subtle touches and lingering glances. I just ignored it, ignored the signs. He tried to speak, but I cut him off. You cheated on me with my best man. How long has this been going on? My voice cracked, but I made sure it was loud enough for them to hear the fury underneath. The room felt like it was closing in, every second stretching into eternity. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the sickening realization that I'd been blind, that I'd been naive enough to trust blindly. All those late nights he'd said he was working, the late texts I caught him hiding, the strange, nervous energy, everything clicked into place now. I turned on my heel, my heart pounding, stomach churning. I grabbed my purse, but before I left, I looked back at them. I saw her trembling, tears streaming down her face. His eyes were dark, unreadable. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead I just walked out, hearing the hollow echo of my heels on the tile. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying that scene over and over. I questioned everything. Was our whole relationship built on lies? Was he ever truly mine? That night I made a decision. I knew I couldn't stay quiet or pretend it hadn't happened. I had to think about what I was going to do next. And as I sat alone in my apartment, the cold truth sank in. This was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let him get away with it, not without a fight. The pain was raw, like 1,000 tiny knives twisting in my gut, but I knew I had to act. That night marked the end of my trust, but also the start of something else. Revenge. Not in a reckless way, it had to be clever, precise. I had to take control. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew I'd find a way to make him regret this betrayal like he'd never imagined. I had to. The next morning was a blur of shock, anger, and a strange numbness that settled over me like a heavy coat I couldn't shrug off. I woke up with the faint scent of last night's wine still lingering in my nose, my skin feeling sticky and contaminated by the night's chaos. The room was silent, except for the hum of the city outside and my own pounding heart. I had no idea what to do first, call him, confront her, or just disappear for a while. But I knew one thing: I couldn't let this go, not without making him pay. I spent the morning obsessively replaying everything. The little signs I ignored, The way he avoided eye contact, the way he'd get defensive when I asked about his phone. That nagging feeling that he was hiding something. My palms were sweaty just thinking about it. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all of it? How could I have been so blind? I finally decided to start digging. I needed proof, something undeniable, so I could finally see the truth for what it was. I remembered that night he'd gone out to meet a client, a story he'd told a dozen times without a single detail that made sense. I went through his phone first. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to. His messages with her weren't just flirty, they were intimate. Flirty. Emojis, secret plans, late-night texts that made my stomach churn just looking at them. I couldn't believe I'd missed it all. When I confronted him later that day, he had the nerve to look surprised, like he was shocked I'd find out. "You're overreacting," he said, voice trembling. "It was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything." That's when I knew I had to be more strategic. I couldn't just accuse him outright. I'd seen enough to know I needed to gather more evidence. That's when I decided to plan a little something. Nothing confrontational yet. I needed him to slip up again, and I knew exactly how. I hacked into his email account, not to be malicious but to find any other hidden clues. And I found them. More deleted messages, plans to meet her again, and even a hotel reservation in her name for a weekend out of town. I printed everything, saved screenshots. I wanted him to feel the weight of what I'd uncovered. I spent the next few days preparing. I didn't want to just catch him. I wanted to humiliate him, make him understand that I knew everything and had proof. I started talking to a few friends, people I trusted, to get advice. Some told me to confront him immediately, others said to wait, to let him sweat it out a little. I was torn, but I knew I had to be careful. I didn't want to fall apart just yet. Finally, I arranged to meet her. I knew I'd find her at the coffee shop where she worked part-time. I wasn't planning to yell or throw punches. That wouldn't serve my purpose. I just wanted to see her face, to watch her squirm, to get her to admit what she'd done. When I saw her behind the counter, her face looked so familiar, yet I'd never seen her like this, guilty, vulnerable. I ordered a coffee, sat across from her, and looked her straight in the eyes. "You and my husband," I said softly, but with enough edge to make her flinch, "you're not as clever as you think you are." She looked like she was about to cry, but I kept my composure. "How long has this been going on?" She swallowed hard. "It's not what you think. We didn't mean for it to happen. Save it." I cut her off. "I have your texts, your hotel reservation. I know everything." Her face went pale. Good. She needed to feel the consequences. I told her I wasn't going to ruin her life, but I was going to make sure she knew exactly what she'd done. I left her sitting there, trembling, feeling the full weight of her actions. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the evidence I'd gathered. The plan was clear now. If he thought he could cheat and get away with it, he was dead wrong. I'd make sure he regretted every second of it. I wasn't just going to confront him. I was going to take control, turn his world upside down, and make him see the damage he'd caused. That's when I realized the revenge wasn't just about him. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and showing him he couldn't betray me without consequences. I poured myself a glass of wine, feeling the cold burn in my throat. I was angry, yes. But more than that, I was determined. He thought he'd played me. Not a chance. It was time he learned what betrayal really meant, how it felt to be caught, exposed, and left to pick up the pieces. And I'd start by executing the plan I'd carefully laid out in my mind. Tomorrow, the game would change. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mixture of adrenaline and dread swirling in my stomach. I knew what I had to do, but actually executing it made my palms sweat. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the evidence I had gathered, the hotel reservation, the texts, the screenshots, with a kind of cold focus I didn't recognize in myself. This wasn't about revenge just to hurt him. It was about closing this chapter once and for all and making sure he understood the extent of his betrayal. My plan was simple on paper, but messy in execution. I was going to surprise him with the proof, but I wanted to do it in a way that left him no room to wiggle free or deny everything. So I got dressed, my best dress, something that made me feel strong. I took a deep breath, grabbed the printed evidence, and headed to his office, which he still used in town. The drive was quiet, just my thoughts racing ahead. When I arrived, I saw him sitting at his desk, typing away like everything was normal. My heart pounded so loud I thought he'd hear it. I approached slowly, sliding the folder across the desk. "Thought you might want to see this," I said softly but with a clear edge. His eyes flicked down to the papers, then back up at me. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice tense. "From your email," I said, voice cold now. "Seems like someone been a little less faithful than I thought." He looked like he'd been punched. "You went through my stuff." "I had to," I said. "You think I didn't notice the signs, the late nights, the nervy texts, the hotel booking? I found everything, and I'm not done yet." I paused, watching him squirm. "You think you can cheat behind my back, lie to me, and then go back to pretending everything's fine?" He was silent for a beat, then finally said, "This isn't fair, you're overreacting." "Oh, I'm overreacting." My voice sharpened. "You think I'm just making a big deal out of nothing? You're the one who decided to screw around with my best man, and now you want to pretend you're innocent." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the evidence was damning. I saw the flicker of shame in his eyes, but it was too late. I'd made my move, and I was just getting started. "Look," I said, voice trembling but steady, "I'm giving you a chance. You can explain." "I don't have to explain anything," he cut me off, rising from his chair. "You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about." I crossed my arms. "Oh, I know enough. Enough to know I shouldn't be with someone who cheats on me. Enough to know I deserve better than a liar and a cheat." I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about control, about making him realize this wasn't going to slide. "So what now?" he asked, voice tight. "Now," I said slowly, "you're going to pack your things and leave. I want all your keys, your phone, everything. You're not coming back here until I say so." I paused, then added, "And I'll be contacting your boss because I want everyone to know what kind of man you really are." He looked stunned, then furious. "You're crazy. This is all some crazy revenge scheme." "You think I care?" I snapped. "I'm done being naive, done trusting you. You want to lie and cheat? Fine. I'll make sure everyone knows how you really are." I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and turned on the voice recorder. "Say something stupid and I'll have proof to back it up." He was speechless. That moment I saw the last flicker of power leave his eyes. I felt an odd sense of relief mixed with the sting of betrayal. I was finally taking control, reclaiming my dignity. I handed him a folder with his belongings list and told him to leave immediately. As he grabbed his coat and stormed out, I didn't feel victorious, just exhausted. But I knew I'd done what I needed to do. It was the first step toward healing. After he left, I sat down, trembling but also strangely liberated. I knew this was only the beginning of my new life. The pain was still there, raw and real, but I'd turn it into something stronger. I looked at the evidence, the recording, and my heart hardened. He thought he could get away with it, but I was going to make sure he paid. Not with violence or destruction, just with undeniable, calculated consequences. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of closure. Now I could start healing properly. And the first thing I was going to do, file for divorce, move on, and never look back. Because the truth was, I deserved better than someone who could betray me like that. I just had to remember that every single day. The aftermath was as chaotic as I expected, but oddly, also oddly peaceful. Once he was gone, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the mess of papers and the voice recording I'd made. My hands still trembled, but beneath that, there was a strange clarity I hadn't felt in years. I'd finally taken back control, and it felt like a weight lifted, though the ache in my chest was still there, like a bruise I couldn't hide. I didn't want to dwell on the what-ifs or the past. Instead, I forced myself to focus on what came next. First, I called my lawyer. I was ready to file for divorce, no more waiting, no more pretending everything was okay. I wanted this chapter closed. As I explained everything, I felt a strange sense of relief. I'd been so afraid to lose him, but now I saw clearly. I was better off without a liar and a cheat. The lawyer advised me to gather all the evidence, my recordings, the texts, the hotel reservation, and keep a detailed record of everything. "This isn't just about the divorce," she said. "It's about protecting yourself if he tries to contest anything or spin stories. Just make sure you have everything documented." I nodded, feeling a flicker of resolve. While waiting for the legal process to start, I decided to clean out his things. I packed the essentials and put them in a box. The feeling of doing that was surreal. like I was finally shedding a part of my life I no longer needed. I didn't want to burn anything or shout at him when he came to pick up his stuff. I just wanted to stay calm, collected, in control. In the days that followed, I avoided contact, except for the necessary legal dealings. Friends and family were supportive, but I kept my circle small. I didn't need anyone's pity. Instead, I poured that energy into myself. I started going to the gym again, something I'd neglected for years. The physical exertion helped clear my mind, and each drop of sweat felt like a small act of rebellion. I was reclaiming my body, my strength. But of course, I couldn't avoid thinking about what I'd uncovered. The betrayal still cut deep, like a fresh wound. I kept asking myself, how could he do this? How could someone I trusted so completely turn out to be such a liar? Every time I replayed that hotel scene in my head, I felt the sting of humiliation and anger. It was a reminder that I'd been naive. I'd trusted him with everything. But now I realized that trust was gone for good. One night, I finally sat down and listened to the recording I'd made. Hearing his voice admit to everything, his denial, his excuses, made me feel sick. But it also fueled my resolve. If I was going to move on, I'd do it on my terms. No more tears, no more nights filled with regret. I'd take this pain and use it as fuel. My friends kept telling me I was strong, but I didn't feel that way yet. I still felt the sting of betrayal deep in my bones. Still, I knew I was on the right path. I decided then that I wouldn't let him or anyone else define me. I'd rebuild piece by piece. I'd find happiness again, even if it meant starting from scratch. The final step in my immediate plan was to hand over the keys and officially end things. I set a date to meet him, not to fight or argue, but simply to give him his belongings and tie up loose ends. I wanted the closure of watching him walk out that door with nothing but his own mistakes. When I thought about it, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I was finally taking control of my life, and that realization made me stand taller. As I waited for that day, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. I knew I'd be okay. I just had to keep moving forward, keep focusing on myself. That betrayal had broken a part of me, but I refused to let it destroy me. Instead, I'd use it to become stronger. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's that I'm more resilient than I ever thought possible. And that somehow was enough to keep me going. The day I handed over his keys, I felt everything finally clicking into place. I was nervous, probably more than I admitted to myself, because I wasn't just giving him possessions. I was closing the chapter on a life I'd built with someone I no longer knew. I had the envelope with the keys, his phone, and a list of everything he'd left behind. When I saw him walk up to my door, the old familiar rush of anxiety hit, but I pushed it down. He looked different, haggard, eyes shadowed, as if the betrayal had already begun to eat him from the inside. I didn't say much. I just handed him the envelope, locked eyes with him for a moment, and said, "Here's everything. Don't come back." My voice was steady, but inside I felt like I was shattering apart. He took the keys, looked at me with a mixture of anger and shame, and then finally said, "You're making a mistake." I shrugged, feeling the cold resolve settle in. "No, I'm making a decision. I deserve better than this. You threw everything away for some stupid affair. I won't be part of the wreckage anymore." I handed him the folder with the evidence I'd kept, the recordings, the screenshots. "This stays with me. You can keep the rest." He hesitated, then turned and walked out, leaving behind the broken pieces of our life. As I watched him go, part of me felt relief. Another part was heavy with the weight of betrayal, but mostly I felt free. That evening I sat on my couch, exhausted but strangely victorious. I had taken control. The legal process was all ready, and I knew that in time I'd get everything I needed. Divorce finalized, joint accounts closed, his name out of my life forever. It was over. The worst was behind me. The next few days were a whirlwind of paperwork, calls, and cleaning out the last of his things. I threw away the cheap souvenirs, the clothes he left behind, and some of the photos of us. It hurt, but I reminded myself, holding on to that would only keep me chained. I needed to let it all go. The memories, the pain, the illusion of what I thought we had, they all had to burn away for me to rebuild. In the quiet moments, I reflected on everything. I kept coming back to that hotel scene, the betrayal, the lies, the way I'd trusted him blindly. But I also remembered something else. I was stronger than I thought. I'd survived the worst shock of my life and come out the other side still standing. Maybe battered, maybe a little, but still upright. I started to reconnect with myself. I signed up for new hobbies, met new friends, and even started dating again, slowly, cautiously. But each step forward made the pain duller. The anger, still there but less overpowering. It was transforming into a bittersweet lesson. I learned to trust myself more, to see the red flags earlier, and most of all, never let anyone make me feel small again. Now I keep the evidence as a reminder. Betrayal isn't the end. It's just a tough chapter, one I had to go through to get to the other side. I realized I didn't need him to define my worth. I was enough all on my own, and I was finally learning that I could survive even the worst betrayals. So I guess my advice is this: trust your instincts, don't ignore the signs, and when the moment comes, take control. Because no one should ever get to tear you down without a fight. That's how I got my life back. And honestly, it feels damn good. Now looking back, I realize that the most important thing I learned through all this mess is that betrayal doesn't define me. It's not the end of my story, it's just a brutal chapter I survived. I've come out on the other side steadier, sharper, and more aware of what I deserve. That pain, that sting of knowing someone I loved so blindly could do this, well, it still lingers. But I refuse to let it control me. Walking into the final step of cutting him out of my life was surprisingly straightforward. I handed over the keys, the last of his stuff, and watched him walk away with nothing but his mistakes. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness, but mostly relief. That night I poured myself a glass of wine and just sat there, thinking about how far I'd come. The tears came, but they were different, more like a cleansing, a release. I thought about all those nights I'd spent doubting myself, all the times I'd ignored the red flags because I wanted to believe in the best. I was stupid, maybe, but I was also human. And now I was finally learning to trust myself again. The betrayal was a brutal lesson, but it also woke me up, made me realize I had been wasting too much time trying to fix someone who didn't want to be fixed. I'd spent years giving him the benefit of the doubt. Now, it was clear I needed to give that to myself. Getting rid of him wasn't just about ending the relationship. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my peace, and my future. I started focusing on what I really wanted: hobbies I'd shelved, friendships I'd neglected, goals I'd put on hold. I signed up for that art class I'd always wanted, reconnected with friends, and slowly let the pain fade into a distant memory. It wasn't easy, and some days I still felt angry or sad, but I refused to let those feelings trap me. Most importantly, I learned that revenge isn't about hurting someone else, at least not in a destructive way. It's about standing up for yourself, taking control, and making sure that the person who betrayed you feels the consequences, not through petty retaliation, but by showing them you're better off without their poison. That's the real victory, proving your worth without their approval. In the end, I realized that I was stronger than I thought. Betrayal had almost broken me, but it also made me realize my own resilience. I'm not perfect, but I'm alive, I'm free, and I'm healing. I didn't need him to be happy, I found that in myself. I can now walk away from this knowing I survived something brutal and came out the other side more aware, more cautious, but also more hopeful. So my message: trust your instincts, listen to that voice inside. When you see the red flags, don't ignore them. And when betrayal happens, don't drown in despair. Use it as fuel to rebuild. Because in the end, the only person responsible for your happiness is you, no one else. And I promise, no matter how dark it gets, there's light waiting for you, sometimes right behind the pain. You just have to be brave enough to walk toward it.